I never thought I'd find love in a housing crisis. But there I was, 35 years old, standing in front of a quaint cottage in San Diego's brewery district, desperately seeking a roommate. Another no-show, I muttered, checking my watch. The summer heat was brutal, making my blonde hair stick to my neck. As a master sommelier, I just landed my dream job consulting for high-end restaurants. The pay was fantastic, but San Diego's rental market was insane. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. "Sorry, running late," the voice had a distinct Belgian accent. I turned to find a tall woman with wavy brunette hair hurrying up the path. Her green eyes sparkled with apology, and something about her confident stride made my heart skip. "I'm Addison Clark," she said, extending her hand. "The brewery kept me longer than expected." "Sydney Bailey," I replied, noticing the subtle scent of hops clinging to her clothes. "You work at a brewery?" "Own one, actually. Craft beer is my life." She smiled, and damn if it wasn't the most genuine smile I'd seen in years. Small operation, but growing. The landlord finally showed up, leading us through the cottage. 2 bedrooms, shared bathroom, and a kitchen that made my sommelier heart sing. Addison and I kept exchanging glances, both clearly falling in love with the place. "The rent is steep," I mentioned, as we stood in the garden afterward. "But split 2 ways. It would be perfect." Addison finished my thought. She hesitated, then added, "My English isn't great. Been here 6 months, still struggling." I found myself saying, I could help with that. "And maybe you could teach me about Belgian beers?" That evening, over coffee at a nearby cafe, we worked out the details. Addison's brewery was 3 blocks away, and my consulting work was flexible. We both loved the cottage's location and its vintage charm. "One condition," Addison said seriously. "No wine snobbery in the house?" I laughed. "Only if you promise not to convert me to beer." We moved in the following week. I arranged my wine collection in the built-in shelves, while Addison set up her home brewing equipment in the garage. The cottage slowly transformed into a curious blend of wine sophistication and craft beer charm. Little did I know that this practical housing solution would turn my life upside down. As I watched Addison struggle with the moving boxes, cursing softly in Flemish, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't just the way she looked in her faded jeans and brewery t-shirt, or how her accent made everyday words sound musical. That night, unpacking my last box, I found myself staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. "Keep it professional, Sydney," I whispered to myself. "She's your roommate, nothing more." But as I lay in bed, listening to Addison humming in the kitchen, I knew I was already in trouble. The woman who was supposed to be just my solution to expensive rent was quickly becoming something else entirely. And in San Diego's competitive beverage industry, that could complicate everything. Living with Addison turned my evenings into an unexpected adventure. After work, we'd sit at our kitchen counter, surrounded by wine glasses and beer samples, teaching each other our crafts. "This one has notes of, how you say, da grapefruit?" Addison would ask, her brow furrowed in concentration. Her Belgian accent made every question sound like poetry. "Close," I'd reply, trying not to stare at how her green eyes lit up with each new word. "More like citrus and pine. Here, try this Sauvignon Blanc for comparison." Our language lessons evolved naturally. I'd help her with pronunciation while she taught me Belgian brewing terms. Sometimes she'd get frustrated, running her fingers through her dark hair. "In Flemish, it's so simple," she'd sigh. "English makes no sense. Try explaining wine terminology to newcomers." I laughed. "Petrichor, forest floor, wet stone." One night, after a particularly successful tasting session, Addison surprised me with a confession. "I almost didn't come to America," she said softly. "My family's brewery in Belgium. They wanted me to stay." "What made you leave?" I asked, watching her fidget with her glass. "Needed to prove something. To myself, maybe." She paused, searching for words. "In Belgium, I was always someone's daughter. Here, I'm just Addison." The moonlight streaming through our kitchen window caught her profile, and my breath hitched. The way she spoke about independence resonated deeply with my own journey. Our weekend tastings became a ritual. I'd bring home rare wines from my consulting jobs, and she'd experiment with new brewing techniques. Sometimes we'd work late into the night, my wine knowledge blending with her beer expertise. "This Belgian triple," I noted one evening, Reminds me of a Viognière's body. Addison's face lit up. You're starting to think like a brewer. Damn, don't tell my sommelier friends, I teased. They'll revoke my certification. But it wasn't just about drinks. We started cooking together, discovering our shared love for experimental pairings. Addison's traditional Belgian recipes merged with my wine country influences, creating dishes that belonged only to us. One rainy Sunday, I found her struggling with paperwork for her brewery. These permit applications, she groaned. The language is impossible. I spent the afternoon helping her navigate the bureaucratic maze, our shoulders touching as we huddled over the documents. The scent of her shampoo mixed with lingering brewery aromas made my head spin. You're saving my business, she said gratefully. How can I repay you? Teach me more about Belgian beers, I replied, ignoring the flutter in my chest. That evening, she introduced me to her brewery's secret recipes, passed down through generations. As she spoke about fermentation temperatures and yeast strains, her passion was infectious. Beer is alive, she explained, eyes shining. Like relationships, it needs time, patience, perfect conditions. The word relationships hung in the air between us. I busied myself with notes about beer styles, pretending not to notice how her hand brushed mine as she reached for her glass. Later that night, I lay awake, thinking about how our lives had become so intertwined. What started as language exchange had evolved into something deeper, more complex. Like a perfectly aged wine or a carefully crafted beer, something was brewing between us. But in the competitive beverage industry, where reputations were everything, I wondered if we were risking too much. Tomorrow, I'd have to face my high-end clients, maintaining my professional image, and Addison had her brewery's future to consider. Still, as I drifted off to sleep, I could hear her humming in her room, the same Belgian folk song she always sang while working. The sound felt like home, and that terrified me more than any business risk ever could. The morning I landed the Morton's Steakhouse chain contract, I burst into our kitchen dancing. Addison was at the counter, reviewing brewery reports, her reading glasses perched adorably on her nose. I got it. I twirled, my blonde hair flying. 10 restaurants, complete wine program overhaul. She jumped up, green eyes sparkling. This calls for celebration. She rushed to the garage, returning with a special bottle. Been saving this Belgian lambic. The next few weeks became a whirlwind. I spent days training restaurant staff while Addison faced her own battles. A major brewery corporation had moved into San Diego, threatening smaller craft operations. They're offering stupid low prices, she confided one evening, looking exhausted. My distributors are getting nervous. I found myself staying up late, helping her strategize. We'd spread papers across our living room floor, wine and beer forgotten as we crunched numbers. What about targeting upscale restaurants? I suggested, thinking of my new connections. Places that appreciate craft quality? Her face lit up. Sydney Bailey, you're brilliant. She hugged me impulsively, and I caught that familiar mix of hops and shampoo that was uniquely Addison. The next day, I mentioned her brewery to Morton's beverage director. There's this amazing Belgian-style craft brewery. The owner's techniques are revolutionary. Set up a tasting, he said immediately. We're looking to expand our beer program. When I told Addison, she nearly knocked me over with another hug. You didn't have to do that. Of course I did. I caught myself before saying something dangerous. You're my roommate. The tasting was scheduled for the following week. I watched proudly as Addison presented her beers, her accent adding authenticity to her brewing heritage. Despite her nerves, she was magnificent. The flavor profile of this saison would complement their aged steaks perfectly, I added, our expertise playing off each other naturally. The director was impressed. We'll start with a trial run in 3 locations. That night, we celebrated properly. Addison cooked traditional Belgian carbonade, and I opened a special Bordeaux. As we clinked glasses, our eyes met across the candlelit table. I couldn't have done this without you, she said softly. We make a good team, I replied, my heart racing. But success brought complications. Rumors started circulating in the industry about our living arrangement. A wine distributor made a snide comment during a tasting. Mixing with the beer crowd now, Sydney? I maintained my professional smile. Quality is quality, regardless of the beverage. Meanwhile, Addison faced pressure from her Belgian investors. They think I'm losing focus, she confided. Say I'm becoming too American. The stress began showing. We started missing our evening tastings, both working late. The kitchen felt empty without our usual lessons and laughter. One night, I came home to find Addison stress brewing, something she did when overwhelmed. The garage was thick with steam and brewing aromas. Talk to me, I said, rolling up my sleeves to help. Everything's changing, she sighed. The business, the competition, us. The word us hung in the air like brewery steam. I busied myself with cleaning equipment, afraid to acknowledge what we both felt. Maybe change is good, I offered carefully. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and something shifted in the air between us. But before either of us could speak, her phone rang, another crisis at the brewery. As she rushed out, I stood in our garage, surrounded by the mingled scents of wine and beer that had become our shared language. Success was supposed to feel better than this, I thought. Instead, it was driving us apart just as we were getting closer. Later, staring at my wine collection, I realized our professional lives were becoming hopelessly entangled with our personal ones. In the competitive beverage industry, that could spell disaster for both of us. But watching Addison's empty chair at our kitchen counter, I wondered if keeping our distance was an even bigger risk. The autumn wine country trip wasn't my idea. Morton's wanted me to scout new vineyards, and Addison needed to research local hops farmers. It made sense to share a car. Road trip, Addison exclaimed, loading her bags into my Volvo. The morning sun caught her brunette waves, and I had to remind myself to focus on driving. The California countryside rolled past our windows, vineyards stretching to the horizon. Addison had brought a thermos of her latest experimental brew, and I'd packed a special bottle of Pinot Noir. Pull over, she suddenly said, pointing to a hidden dirt road. That sign says Organic Hops Farm. The elderly farmer took an immediate liking to Addison's accent, giving us a private tour. I watched her examine the hop flowers, her face lighting up like a child's on Christmas morning. The terroir here, she explained excitedly. It's perfect for Belgian-style ales. Now you sound like a wine snob, I teased, loving how she'd absorbed my terminology. Later, at a small family vineyard, I returned the favor. The vintner guided us through his cellar, and I could sense Addison watching me as I assessed each wine. Your nose twitches when you concentrate, she whispered, making me blush. The sun was setting when we discovered the hidden vineyard. An old Italian couple welcomed us into their private tasting room, insisting we try their secret vintage. This wine, the old woman said with a knowing smile, we save for special couples. Neither of us corrected her assumption. The wine was extraordinary, or maybe it was the way the golden light played across Addison's face as she sipped. Come, she said suddenly, taking my hand. Let's watch the sunset from the hill. We climbed through the vineyard, bottles in hand, until we reached a secluded spot overlooking the valley. The air was thick with the scent of ripening grapes and wild herbs. Sometimes, Addison said softly, I forget why I left Belgium. She turned to me, her green eyes reflecting the dying sun. Then, I remember. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure she could hear it. Why did you really come to America, Addison? To find something authentic. Her voice was barely a whisper. Something real. I'm not sure who moved first, maybe we both did. But suddenly her lips were on mine, tasting of wine and possibility. The kiss was gentle at first, then deeper, years of unspoken feelings pouring out. When we finally broke apart, the stars were beginning to appear. Addison touched her lips, looking stunned. That was unexpected? I offered, terrified I'd ruined everything. Perfect, she finished, pulling me back for another kiss. The drive home was charged with nervous energy. We barely spoke, both processing what had happened. Back at our cottage, we awkwardly retreated to our separate rooms. I lay awake for hours, replaying the kiss in my mind. What did this mean for our living situation, our businesses, the delicate balance we'd built? The next morning, I found a note on the kitchen counter. Addison had left early for the brewery, citing an emergency meeting. My phone buzzed with messages about a crisis at Morton's. Reality came crashing back. We weren't just Sydney and Addison anymore. We were a master sommelier and a craft brewmaster, competitors in the same industry, with reputations to maintain. Standing in our kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of our intertwined lives, her brewing notebooks mixed with my wine journals, Belgian cookbooks. Beside my food pairing guides, I realized there was no going back to being just roommates. The question was, were we brave enough to move forward, and would our professional worlds allow it? That evening, Addison came home late. We danced around each other in the kitchen, neither mentioning the vineyard, but I caught her watching me when she thought I wasn't looking, and I knew the memory of that sunset kiss was haunting her too. Thanksgiving snuck up on us like a stealth bomber. After weeks of awkward dancing around our vineyard kiss, Addison suggested cooking dinner together. Traditional American meets Belgian fusion, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. Unless you have other plans? I didn't. My family was in Boston, and I couldn't face my mother's questions about my roommate situation just yet. The kitchen became our neutral territory. I marinated the turkey in Belgian beer, while Addison worked on her grandmother's spiced cranberry sauce. The domestic intimacy was both comforting and torturous. "Taste this," she said, holding out a spoon. Her fingers brushed my lips as I sampled the sauce, sending electricity through my body. "Perfect," I managed to say, my voice husky. We were so focused on cooking, we almost missed the doorbell. Standing there was my mother, Marie Bailey, complete with matching luggage. "Surprise," she breezed past me, eyeing our cozy kitchen setup. I thought my daughter shouldn't be alone on Thanksgiving. Addison dropped a wooden spoon. "I'll get another place setting." My mother's eyes followed her. "So this is the famous roommate?" The tension during dinner was thick enough to cut with a knife. My mother interrogated Addison about her brewery, her accent, her family back in Belgium. To her credit, Addison handled it with grace. "More wine, Mrs. Bailey," she offered, reaching for my special Chateauneuf du Pape. "Marie, please," my mother replied, studying how our hands brushed during the pour. After dinner, Mom insisted on helping with dishes, sending Addison to the living room. "Sydney," she whispered, "is there something you need to tell me?" "Mom, please," I begged. "Not now." "I see how you look at her," she pressed, "and how she looks at you." Before I could respond, we heard a crash from the living room. Addison had knocked over a wine rack while trying to start the fireplace. "I'm so sorry," she began, but I was already beside her, checking for cuts. "Are you hurt?" My hands cradled her face without thinking. My mother cleared her throat. "I should turn in early, jet lag." Once Mom retreated to the guest room, the energy between Addison and me shifted. Maybe it was the wine, or the holiday spirit, or just weeks of built-up tension. "Sydney," Addison whispered, still in my arms. "I can't pretend anymore." Her lips found mine in the firelight, and this time there was no holding back. The kiss deepened, filled with weeks of longing and unspoken desires. My hands tangled in her hair as she pressed me against the wall. What followed was a blur of sensation and emotion. We somehow made it to her bedroom, where passion finally overcame professional boundaries. Dawn found us tangled in sheets, reality seeping back in with the morning light. My mother's presence down the hall felt like a spotlight on our situation. "What happens now?" Addison asked, tracing patterns on my bare shoulder. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A crisis at Morton's. Their holiday wine shipment had been mislabeled. Simultaneously, Addison's phone lit up with brewery emergencies. We dressed quickly, avoiding eye contact. The real world was calling, demanding we step back into our professional roles. "We should talk about this," I said, pausing at her door. "Yes," she agreed. But we both knew our day would be consumed by work fires. My mother was in the kitchen when I emerged, watching me with knowing eyes. "Life's too short for hiding, Sydney," she said quietly. I grabbed my keys, mind racing. Last night had changed everything, yet nothing was resolved. Our personal and professional lives were now hopelessly entangled. As I headed to Morton's, I caught sight of Addison leaving for her brewery. She looked back, our eyes meeting briefly across the morning sun. In that moment, I knew we'd crossed a line we couldn't uncross. The question was, could we build something real in an industry that thrived on competition and reputation? Or would last night become just another vintage memory, bottled up and stored away? December brought storms to San Diego, both meteorological and emotional. Addison and I had settled into a new rhythm after Thanksgiving, stealing kisses between business calls and sharing secret smiles across our kitchen counter. Then the email arrived. "Charlotte's back in town," Addison said one morning, her face pale as she stared at her phone. "She wants to meet." I nearly dropped my coffee. Charlotte was Addison's ex-partner, both in business and life, from her early days in San Diego. They'd had a messy split before I came along. "She's threatening to expose brewery secrets," Addison's voice cracked. "Says she helped develop the recipes." I moved to comfort her, but she pulled away. "I need to handle this alone." The next week was torture. Addison spent long hours at the brewery, coming home late and leaving before dawn. When our paths crossed, she was distracted, distant. Then the whispers started. At a high-end wine tasting, I overheard conversations about that Belgian brewery's questionable practices and stolen family recipes. "Your roommate's quite the talk of the industry," a distributor smirked. Though perhaps roommate isn't the right word anymore? I maintained my professional smile, but inside I was seething. That night, I waited up for Addison. "We need to talk about Charlotte," I said when she finally came home. "There's nothing to discuss." She headed for the garage, her sanctuary. "She's spreading rumors, Addison. It's affecting both our reputations." She whirled around, green eyes flashing. "You think I don't know that? You think I don't see how this could ruin everything we've built? Then let me help." I reached for her hand. "Like you helped with Morton's?" Her voice was sharp. "Everyone thinks I'm succeeding because of our connection." The word hung between us like poison. "Is that what you think?" "I don't know what to think anymore." She ran her fingers through her hair. "Charlotte says..." "Charlotte?" I stepped back. "You've been meeting with her?" "She claims she has proof. Documents from Belgium, emails from my family's brewery." "And you believe her?" "I don't know." Addison's accent thickened with emotion. "Everything's complicated now. Us, the business, my family's legacy. So I'm just another complication?" The words tasted bitter. "That's not what I meant." She moved toward me, but I backed away. "Maybe we should take a break," I suggested, hating every word. "Give you space to sort this out." The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Addison nodded. "Maybe we should." That night, I packed a bag and checked into a hotel. The winter storm outside matched my mood, rain lashing against windows that felt nothing like home. Days passed in a blur of professional obligations. I threw myself into work, avoiding industry events where I might run into Addison or hear more rumors. But one evening, a colleague mentioned seeing Charlotte at a bar, bragging about how easy it was to manipulate that Belgian brewmaster. I called Addison immediately, no answer. Racing to the brewery, I found her alone in her office, surrounded by papers. She looked up, eyes red. "Charlotte was lying," she said before I could speak. "I found the original recipes. They're all mine." "I know," I said softly. "But I pushed you away anyway." Her voice broke. "I let her make me doubt everything, even us." "Why?" "Because success on my own terms meant everything. Until I lost you." The storm outside intensified, rain drumming against the brewery's roof. We stood there, the weight of unspoken words filling the space between us. "I should go," I finally said, turning toward the door. "Sydney, wait." Her voice stopped me. I was wrong, about everything. But some wounds need time to heal. I left her standing there, drove back to my hotel room, and ordered room service with a bottle of wine I couldn't taste. That night, watching the storm rage over San Diego, I wondered if love in the beverage industry was always destined to turn bitter, like a wine left too long in the sun. January brought the San Diego International Wine Competition, followed immediately by the Craft Brewers Conference. I threw myself into preparation, treating each wine evaluation like emotional armor. Then I saw the competitor list. Addison's brewery was entering the experimental category with a wine barrel-aged beer. Of course she was. We hadn't spoken since that night at the brewery. The cottage felt empty without her, though her belongings remained. I'd been staying at hotels, coming home only to change clothes. The competition morning arrived crisp and clear. I adjusted my navy blazer, pinned on my master sommelier badge, and stepped into the judging room. "Sydney Bailey," the head judge announced. "You'll be leading panel 3. I froze. Panel 3 was experimental beverages, including beer-wine hybrids. They'd assigned me to judge Addison's category. "Is there a conflict?" someone asked. I thought of Addison's green eyes, her passionate brewing speeches, our shared kitchen moments. "No conflict," I lied. The morning passed in a blur of swirling, sniffing, and spitting. Then they brought out the hybrid category. I recognized her entry immediately, the crystal clear amber liquid, the delicate wine notes. "Remarkable integration," another judge murmured. "The wine character enhances rather than overwhelms." My hands shook as I lifted the glass. One sip and I knew she'd used techniques I'd taught her about wine aging, combined with her Belgian brewing expertise. It was us, in liquid form. Later that day, across town at the beer conference, Addison was presenting her brewery's innovations. I knew because my phone kept buzzing with industry updates. "You should see this," my assistant said, showing me a video. Addison was on stage, looking professional in a charcoal suit that made her eyes pop. "This fusion project," she was saying, "taught me that tradition and innovation can coexist. Sometimes the best creations come from unexpected partnerships." My heart clenched. Was she talking about beer or us? That evening, both competitions hosted a joint networking event. I almost didn't go, but duty called. I was discussing wine trends with importers when I heard her voice. The wine influence was intentional, Addison was explaining to a group of brewers. I had an excellent teacher. Our eyes met across the room. She looked tired but beautiful, her brunette hair swept up elegantly. "Sydney," she called out, starting toward me. Just then, the event organizer clinked his glass. "Tonight's special presentation, a collaborative project between wine and beer industries." My stomach dropped. I'd forgotten about this part. "Our master sommelier Sydney Bailey and brewmaster Addison Clark will demonstrate the art of pairing wine and beer with cuisine." The room's attention turned to us. We'd planned this demonstration months ago before everything fell apart. Addison reached the stage first, setting up her bottles. "We can cancel," she whispered. "And risk our professional reputations?" I replied, arranging my wine glasses. "Never." What followed was an hour of exquisite torture. We moved in perfect sync, our presentation flowing naturally from years of practice in our kitchen. Every time our hands brushed, electricity sparked. "The subtle notes in the saison complement the wine's minerality," I explained to the crowd. "While the oak aging creates a bridge between traditions," Addison added, completing my thought like she always had. The audience was captivated, but all I could focus on was her presence beside me, the familiar way she gestured when excited, the slight tremor in her voice when our eyes met. After the presentation, applause thundered. We'd proven that wine and beer could coexist beautifully. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. "Sydney." Addison caught my arm as I tried to leave. "That beer you judged today was beautiful," I finished. "You've mastered the wine aging process." I had inspiration. Her fingers lingered on my wrist. "Come home, please? The cottage feels wrong without you." I looked at her, really looked at her, seeing the regret and hope in those green eyes. But before I could respond, we were swarmed by industry people, pulling us in opposite directions with congratulations and questions. Walking to my hotel that night, I realized we'd created something unique together, something that transcended industry boundaries. The question was, could we do the same with our hearts? Spring arrived with unexpected news. "Wine Enthusiast wants to feature you," my agent announced. "They're calling you the future of beverage integration." I sat in our cottage kitchen. I'd finally moved back home after the competition, staring at the email. The article would spotlight my work bridging the wine and beer worlds. "They want to interview Addison too," my agent added. "Something about revolutionary Belgian-American fusion." Speaking of Addison, she burst through the door that evening, her face flushed with excitement. "Sydney, you won't believe this." "The magazine feature?" I asked, looking up from my laptop. "No, well, yes, that too, but there's more." She paced the kitchen, practically vibrating. "InBev wants to buy my brewery." My heart stopped. InBev was the largest brewing company in the world. This was huge and terrifying. "They're offering full creative control," she continued, "plus distribution across Europe, including Belgium. Your family must be thrilled," I managed. Her excitement dimmed slightly. "Actually, I haven't told them yet. I wanted you to be first." The significance of that statement hung between us. We'd been carefully rebuilding our relationship, taking things slowly, learning to balance personal and professional. What are you thinking? I asked softly. She sat beside me, running fingers through her hair. It's complicated. The money's incredible, but I built this brewery to be independent, to prove myself. She looked at me. To find my own path. I understood completely. My own career was taking off in unexpected directions. The magazine feature would cement my reputation as an industry innovator. That night, unable to sleep, I found Addison in the garage, brewing a test batch. She'd shed her business clothes for worn jeans and a brewery tank top. Couldn't sleep either? She asked, checking temperatures. Been thinking about choices, I replied, hopping onto her workbench. About paths not taken. She added hops to the boil, the aromatic steam filling the space between us. Remember when our biggest worry was splitting the rent? I laughed. And teaching you English wine terms? You were a terrible teacher, she teased, moving closer. I learned more watching your lips form the words. The air grew thick with more than just brewery steam. We'd been so careful lately, professional in public, cautious in private. Addison, I started, but she pressed a finger to my lips. I'm turning down InBev, she said quietly. What? Why? Because success means nothing if I can't share it with you. She took my hands. I'm done pretending we're just colleagues who happen to live together. My heart raced. The industry can adapt. She stepped between my knees, like we did. The kiss was different this time, not desperate like Thanksgiving, not uncertain like the vineyard. This was sure, steady, like a perfectly aged wine or a well-crafted beer. Later, curled together on our living room couch, Addison traced patterns on my arm. What about your magazine feature? I'm going to tell them the truth, I said, about how a Belgian brewmaster taught me that great taste knows no boundaries. She smiled against my shoulder. Very diplomatic. I learned from the best. I turned to face her. But I'm also done hiding. Let them write what they want. The next morning, I woke to find Addison on the phone, speaking rapid Flemish. From her gestures, I gathered she was telling her family about declining InBev. When she finished, she looked drained but peaceful. They understand, she said. Actually, they asked when they're going to meet you. Meet me? I squeaked. Apparently, anyone who can make their daughter turn down InBev must be pretty special. I pulled her close, breathing in her familiar brewery scent. Outside, spring flowers were blooming in our small garden, defying traditional growing seasons. Rather like us, I thought, a master sommelier and a Belgian brewmaster, breaking industry norms, creating something uniquely our own. We should celebrate, Addison suggested. I have a new beer-wine hybrid fermenting. Of course you do, I laughed. Does it have a name? She kissed me softly. I was thinking of calling it Perfect Blend. Summer in San Diego brought a heat wave and life-changing decisions. After the magazine feature went viral, Addison and I found ourselves at a crossroads. What if we combined our expertise officially? She suggested one sweltering evening. We were sitting in our garden, sharing her latest experimental brew. You mean beyond just living together? I watched her face in the fading light. I'm thinking bigger. Her green eyes sparkled with that familiar entrepreneurial fire. A place that celebrates both wine and beer, something uniquely ours. The idea took root like a grapevine in fertile soil. We spent nights sketching plans on napkins, imagining a space where wine and beer could coexist beautifully. We'll need investors, I mused, running numbers on my laptop. The startup costs are significant. Addison nodded, pacing our kitchen. I've been talking with some industry contacts. They're intrigued by the concept. Then came the meeting with James Porter, a notorious conservative investor known for backing traditional ventures. He sat across from us in his mahogany-paneled office, frowning at our proposal. A wine and beer tasting room? He adjusted his tie. It's unprecedented. Exactly. I leaned forward. We're targeting an untapped market. And your personal relationship? His tone made my spine stiffen. Won't that complicate things? Addison reached for my hand under the table. Our relationship is what makes this work. Porter's eyes narrowed. San Diego's beverage industry is traditional, conservative. Times change, I replied firmly. Our success proves that. He studied us for a long moment. "I'll consider it, but I have conditions." Those conditions turned out to be suffocating. Separate management structures, different operating hours for wine and beer services, no public acknowledgement of our relationship. "He's trying to split us up," Addison fumed as we left, "professionally and personally." Back home, we faced hard truths. The startup costs were daunting, and Porter's investment would make everything easier. "Maybe we should wait," I suggested, watching Addison stress brew in the garage. "Build more capital first." She stopped stirring the mash. "I'm tired of waiting. Tired of hiding." That night, unable to sleep, I went through our finances again. My consulting business was thriving, and Addison's brewery had a loyal following. "What if we did it ourselves?" I asked over breakfast. "Smaller scale but completely on our terms?" Addison's face lit up. "We could start with pop-up events, test the market." The idea evolved rapidly. We'd host specialized tastings, combining my wine expertise with her brewing knowledge, build a following before opening a permanent space. Our first event was in a borrowed warehouse. String lights twinkled above carefully arranged tasting stations. I wore my best blazer, Addison her brewing boots with a suit jacket. "Ready?" she whispered, squeezing my hand as guests arrived. The evening was magical. Wine enthusiasts discovered craft beer complexities. Beer lovers explored wine subtleties. Our presentations flowed naturally, our chemistry obvious and engaging. "You two make it look easy," a guest commented. "Like you've been doing this forever." In a way, we had. Every evening spent in our kitchen, every tasting note shared, every blend attempted, it had all led to this moment. The success of that first event led to others. Local restaurants requested private tastings. Industry publications wrote features. Our Instagram following exploded. But not everyone was supportive. Conservative industry voices questioned our concept. Traditional venues declined to host us. Some distributors made thinly veiled comments about maintaining professional standards. Through it all, Addison remained my anchor. When doubt crept in, she'd pull me into the garage to taste her latest creation. When critics spoke up, I'd open a special bottle and remind her why we started this journey. One evening, after a particularly successful event, we sat in our garden. The night air was heavy with jasmine and possibility. "I have an idea," Addison said suddenly, "about the permanent space." She pulled out her phone, showing me a listing. An old winery on the outskirts of San Diego, complete with production facilities and a tasting room. "It needs work," she admitted. "But imagine what we could create there." I looked at the photos, then at her hopeful face. The space was perfect, room for both wine and beer production, a gorgeous tasting room, even living quarters upstairs. "It's expensive," I warned. "But it's ours," she replied. "No investors, no conditions, just us." Under the summer stars, we dared to dream bigger than we ever had. The path ahead wasn't easy, but we'd face it together, like a perfectly balanced blend of wine and beer. "To us," Addison raised her glass. "To breaking boundaries," I clinked mine against hers. "And to love," I thought, watching her smile in the starlight. The most unexpected and perfect blend of all. The launch party for Perfect Blend, our combined wine brewery venture, was set for a balmy October evening. We'd spent months renovating the old winery, transforming it into something uniquely ours. "Nervous?" I asked Addison, watching her adjust her tie in our new apartment mirror above the tasting room. "Terrified," she admitted, her Belgian accent thicker with anxiety. "You." I smoothed my blazer, touching the master sommelier pin for luck. "Beyond terrified." The space below was filling with industry elite. Through the window, I could see James Porter arriving, despite rejecting our investment proposal. Local restaurant owners, distributors, critics, everyone who'd ever doubted us was here. "Your mother's here," Addison said softly, spotting Marie Bailey entering with flowers. Mom had become our unexpected champion, helping with renovations and offering business advice. She'd even flown to Belgium to meet Addison's family, returning with their traditional recipes and blessing. "Ready to face the wolves?" I took Addison's hand. She squeezed back. Together. The tasting room was stunning. Exposed brick walls displayed both wine racks and beer taps. The central bar, crafted from reclaimed wine barrels and copper brewing vessels, told our story without words. I clinked a glass for attention. Welcome to Perfect Blend, where tradition meets innovation, Addison continued, our practiced introduction flowing naturally. We'd designed the evening as a journey. Each station paired wines and beers that complemented each other, challenging preconceptions about both beverages. The saison's citrus notes mirror the Sancerre perfectly, I explained to a group of wine snobs. Nearby, Addison was introducing beer enthusiasts to Belgian Trappist ales aged in wine barrels. The oak adds complexity, like in fine wines. The energy shifted when James Porter raised his hand during the Q&A. This is all very innovative, he said, emphasizing the last word. But how do you maintain professional objectivity given your personal involvement? The room tensed. This was the moment we'd prepared for. Addison spoke first. Our personal relationship strengthens our professional judgment. We challenge each other daily. And that challenge, I added, leads to better products and experiences for our customers. But the industry standards, Porter began, are evolving, interrupted Michaela Kelly, the restaurant chain owner who'd first believed in us. Perfect Blend represents the future. Support came from unexpected quarters. Traditional wine distributors praised our innovative pairings. Craft beer pioneers appreciated our respect for brewing heritage. The evening's highlight was unveiling our signature creation, a beer-wine hybrid we'd spent months perfecting. As guests sipped, their expressions shifted from skepticism to surprise to delight. It's extraordinary, admitted a prominent wine critic. I can't tell where the wine ends and the beer begins. That's the point, Addison smiled, wrapping an arm around my waist publicly for the first time at an industry event. The gesture didn't go unnoticed. Whispers circulated, but they were drowned out by genuine appreciation for what we'd created. Later, as guests mingled, my mother cornered us by the bar. I'm proud of you both, she said, eyes misty. You're changing things. Small steps, I demurred. Sometimes small steps lead to big changes, Addison replied, her green eyes meeting mine. The party wound down past midnight. As the last guests left, we found ourselves alone in our creation. The space hummed with possibility, beer taps gleaming beside wine bottles. We did it, I breathed, still hardly believing. Not yet, Addison said mysteriously. One more thing. She led me to the rooftop garden we'd created, overlooking the city lights. String lights twinkled above herbs and hop vines we'd planted. Remember our first tasting here? She asked. When this was just a rundown building? I nodded, wondering where this was going. You said something that day, she continued, about how spaces, like relationships, need the right conditions to thrive. My heart began racing as she reached into her pocket. Sydney Bailey, she said softly, you've helped me create something beautiful, something that defies expectations and breaks boundaries. The ring she held caught the starlight, simple and elegant like our shared dream. Will you keep breaking boundaries with me? The answer was as natural as the perfect blend of wine and beer, as inevitable as the way our lives had intertwined. But before I could speak, the automatic sprinklers chose that exact moment to activate, soaking us both. Laughing and drenched, we ran for cover, the ring safely tucked in Addison's pocket. Some things I thought, watching her wring out her tie, were worth getting a little wet for. 1 year after Perfect Blend's opening, I stood in our rooftop garden, watching the sunset paint San Diego's skyline. The herb garden had flourished, hop vines climbing trellises beside grape varieties we'd planted for decoration. Penny for your thoughts? Addison's voice carried from behind. She just finished brewing a special anniversary batch downstairs. Just remembering, I smiled, touching the ring on my finger. Hard to believe how much has changed. Perfect Blend had exceeded our wildest expectations. Our hybrid creations had won international awards, and the tasting room was booked months in advance. Even James Porter had become a regular, though he'd never admit to enjoying beer-wine pairings. The Belgian beer magazine wants to feature us, Addison said, wrapping her arms around my waist. They're calling us pioneers. And Wine Spectator? Already confirmed for next month. She kissed my neck. They want to photograph us in the production area. The industry had slowly adapted to us. Our marriage last spring had made headlines in beverage publications, but for all the right reasons. Power couple revolutionizes drink culture, they'd said. Remember when we thought we had to choose? I turned in her arms. Between personal and professional. Between beer and wine? She laughed. Between tradition and innovation? We'd proven them all wrong. Perfect Blend hosted weekly education sessions, teaching wine lovers about beer complexity and helping beer enthusiasts appreciate wine subtleties. Your mother called, Addison said. She's arriving tomorrow to help with the expansion plans. The expansion. My heart raced thinking about it. We'd bought the building next door, planning to create a teaching facility for aspiring brewers and sommeliers. Did you tell her about the other news? I asked. That her daughter's crazy enough to start a beverage certification program combining wine and beer expertise? Addison's green eyes sparkled. Not yet. The program was our dream, creating a new generation of beverage professionals who could bridge the divide between wine and beer. We'd already had inquiries from across the country. Speaking of news, Addison pulled away slightly. I have something for you. She led me to our private tasting room, where a single bottle sat on the counter. The label was new, elegant script over a watercolor design. Sydney's Reserve, I read, touching the bottle reverently. A beer-wine hybrid, aged in French oak. She poured 2 glasses. I've been working on it secretly for months. The liquid caught the evening light, golden with amber highlights. I lifted the glass, inhaling. Wine notes first, she encouraged. Citrus, stone fruit. I paused. Is that white peach? From your favorite Viognier barrels. The taste was extraordinary, layers of wine complexity wrapped in Belgian beer craftsmanship. Like our relationship, defying categorization. This is... I blinked back tears. Us, she finished. In liquid form. We stood together, watching the sun set through floor-to-ceiling windows. Below, staff prepared for evening service. The familiar sounds of bottles being opened and taps being cleaned drifted up. I have something to tell you too, I said softly. Michaela Kelly wants to franchise Perfect Blend. She's offering to back locations in every major city. Addison set down her glass. Franchise? That would mean. We could spread this dream nationwide. I touched her cheek. Show everyone that love doesn't follow industry rules. She pulled me close, our foreheads touching. As long as we keep the original. Always. I promised. This is home. The evening crowd began arriving downstairs. Soon we'd join them, sharing our passion for breaking boundaries and blending traditions. But for now, we stayed on our rooftop, sharing Sydney's Reserve and planning our future. The ring on my finger caught the last rays of sunlight, throwing rainbows across Addison's face. To us, she raised her glass. To Perfect Blends, I replied. And to love, I thought, watching her in the fading light, the most unexpected, boundary-breaking, perfect blend of all. Below us, San Diego hummed with life. Perfect Blend's lights twinkled on, welcoming another evening of discoveries. And we stood together, 2 women who dared to mix wine with beer, love with business, tradition with innovation. Some said it couldn't work. We proved them wrong, 1 glass at a time.